Good morning, everyone. I am Taylor Schneider. I'm the program manager for Latent AI's federal work. And today we're honored to have Rear Admiral Doug Small, retired, as a guest for our conversation about the benefits, challenges, and future of Edge AI. So Admiral Small has a background. He recently retired after a 36-year career that saw him command at various levels. From his time at sea aboard the USS Camden, during Operation Desert Storm, to his subsequent pivot into the engineering duty community and top leadership roles at Program Executive Office Integrated Warfare Systems, or PEO IWS, and then ultimately as the commander of Naval Information Warfare Systems Command, NAVWAR. Admiral Small continually pushed the boundaries of what's possible. He championed data-driven decision-making. He oversaw the delivery of networking and cyber capabilities, and led the Navy's ambitious Project Overmatch, which was an effort to unify maritime forces with a software-driven networked edge. He currently serves as the newest advisor to Latent AI, helping us best deliver solutions that help speed up data to decision on the battlefield in real time. So we're really excited that you're here. Thank you for taking the time today. I'm particularly excited as a naval officer myself to be talking to you. So first off, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what initially drew you to join the Navy and then to stay in for 36 years.
I'm from a small town in northern Wisconsin, and was looking for ways to go to college, and the Navy provided me with that, with a scholarship to ROTC. And so I went off to college and then joined the Navy right out of that. I was a surface warfare officer. And, coming in, I figured I would do 4 years and then figure out what the world had. But I absolutely loved what I did, and I stuck around. Went to graduate school, got a PhD in physics at NPS, and loved every aspect of everything that I've done in the Navy. And so, was, I guess, allowed to, keep going. And after 36 years, it's pretty amazing thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a long time. So thank you. You mentioned your PhD in physics. I think your undergrad was also in physics. I'd love to hear more about how that education influenced you as you transition into the acquisition community and solving problems within the acquisition space.
Yeah, the thing about education and graduate education, and especially in arts and sciences and whatnot, is it's as much as about what are you actually studying as it is about learning how to learn. And I think that's probably the thing that benefited me the most. It's not like I was ever going to become a physicist or anything like that, but learning how to learn, to become a fast learner, to be able to understand what it is that you need to understand, if you will, in any given field. I think that's helped me quite a bit. And it makes you ask better questions, I'd like to think. And yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. Just learning how to learn, be a fast learner. I've been in so many different fields. The one thing about the Navy that's so cool is, every 3 or 4 years you get to do something different. And, it provides you with another opportunity to learn something else. And in acquisition, I've mainly been, in sort of higher tech fields, and, being able to learn things like electronic warfare and radar, communications and all these different things has been very helpful to have that background.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also something you said about learning to learn is particularly relevant for us in AI, because everything is constantly changing, and being able to process the new research and think about ways to apply it in your stack is incredibly crucial. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think if we transition to one of your most probably lengthy, influential, and recent projects was your work on Project Overmatch. You were personally tapped by the CNO to lead Project Overmatch, which is an enabler in Siege ADC2. So can you talk a little bit about how you approached assembling a team, setting objectives, and ultimately delivering in that environment that we talked about that is constantly changing. The AI world as well as the battlefield is constantly evolving.
Yeah, I think like any like any other project I've ever been associated with, it comes down to, like you mentioned, the team that's actually doing the work. And so, when you have a mandate like we had, it meant set a high bar and get some really talented people together. And then for me, it's certainly learn what you need to learn, but get out of their way and let them do, what it is that they need to do. And so there were a couple of people that I had been familiar with, through my time at DOIWS and other places, and I relied on them to help pull together, um, people to handle each of the aspects of the project. And we set a high bar for the people that came on the team, and then gave them a lot of authority and responsibility to execute. And so that was, you have to find people that want to thrive in a situation like that, right? Not everybody is comfortable being uncomfortable, not knowing what the the end goal actually is, right? Being able to be agile in getting to where you need to go. But changing the way we do business, and it was an interesting team building experience of finding people that were comfortable being uncomfortable and just moving out.
And I think the aspect that you mentioned of changing how we do business kind of leads into my next question, which was, from my perspective, Project Overmatch represented a shift from a platform-centric environment to a network and software-centric capability approach. So how do you think that the acquisition community either has or needs to adapt its processes, its mindset, change the way it does business to deliver those capabilities?
Yeah, and there's a lot in that question. There's almost every aspect, from how our programs are budgeted and how funding is allocated, through how contracts are executed and systems developed and installed, is runs through platform-centric lines of accounting, if you will. And so, trying to take a more enterprise approach to something like that um, can be tough. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. We do have examples of that. PEO IWS, the Integrated Warfare Systems PEO, has the same challenge when it comes to combat systems, weapons, sensors. Is how do you spread that goodness across multiple platforms, as well as how do you abstract it and put it on things that aren't traditional platforms. So we do have, within the systems part, if you will, of Navy acquisition, we do have some history of doing this. In this regard, it was as much about becoming less platform centric, but also crossing all those domains, right? So from space to aviation to surface and undersea, crossing all of those domains in that kind of breaking through that platform centricity provided another degree of difficulty to the challenge.
I think, especially across those domains, it's hard because all the users have different needs and application of the data and the algorithms that they're using in different capacities. Did you see any challenges with fleet adoption of new technologies as they were delivered in that context, or additional context, maybe unfamiliarity with new technology, or I guess what kind of fleet adaptation challenges did you experience?
Yeah, and they were many. Going back to the last question, as kind of a lead in to this answer, one of the key things we learned was that to become more network and capability centric, if you will, you have to abstract the capability from the platform and the hardware. You know, if you need to have a specific set of computers to run your thing, that means you have to install a bunch of hardware to get your capability installed on the platform. Doing that across, aircraft and aircraft carriers and submarines, that's not really, it's not a feasible. It's really difficult to go fast to do something like that. Surely we do it, but it takes a long time to get things fielded. Really what you need to do is you need to focus on the software aspects of it. Figure out how to abstract the software from any of the underlying compute, and then make sure that the capabilities are resident in software and move software at the speed where it matters, right? And so get the architecture correct so that you can just move software. That's really one of the key things for how to break through that platform centricity. It also helps with the fleet adaptation, because one of the constant things that I've heard basically throughout my acquisition career is type model series, right? Every line up a series of destroyers, and every single one of them will have a different version of, from combat systems to sensor versions to Kane's versions to you name it. It'll be across the board, and so getting to a sort of unifying on type model series. Once you get that architecture correct, then you can bring the same capability to every platform. And think about what that does for training and you're only training on small changes to versions that everybody has, right? So easing the entirety of that whole, the training cycle, the logistics cycle, the sustainment, everything becomes so much simpler when you can get to, when you can get very much smaller numbers of version differences from platform to platform, and really focus on the software.
Yeah, I think as a prior surface warfare officer, I'm very familiar with the configuration management challenges. And I think this kind of is reflected in some of the ways that Latent AI approaches things in our hardware agnostic compiling and deploying models. Like we'll write the machine code for the hardware, but we aren't writing to the hardware, which allows some flexibility. And then hopefully, as you mentioned, some user adoption ease. So thank you. That was very interesting. I kind of wanted to expand a little bit to how you think about the future of AI and its uses in the DoD. So what type of advantages that edge AI can provide warfighters, how we can use this to maintain a tactical advantage over our adversaries. So I think to start off, what do you see as the most pressing or near-term challenges and opportunities for AI and ML in the DoD?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start by just saying that, anybody who thinks they have their arms around all of the opportunities resident in artificial intelligence, right? It's kind of like you said at the intro, it's changing so fast every day that, we create, teams of people to go off and study, hey, what should we use this application of AI for? And by the time they're done, something else has come out. And so, driving some agility through all of our processes to be able to take advantage of these extraordinary times, I think is a critical thing that we have to get right. So huge opportunities in artificial intelligence. I think personally, I think that's the way we on the provider side, on the acquisition, that's the way we need to think about it. Is it's opportunities to get things in the hands and minds of warfighters quickly, and let them help us figure out, how would they use such a thing or not, so we can, move quickly to the thing that's next. So I think the huge opportunities. Time is of the essence. It's changing so quickly, and in this competition that we're in, strategic competition, there cannot be a second place. There just cannot be a second place. So we have to move with a lot of speed and agility. And it's a it's an uncomfortable place to be, because so many of our systems and organizations and structures are set up to do things like, I see a gap in capability that I need to close. Let me develop a con-op for that, and then write a bunch of requirements, then issue those requirements to somebody, deliver, some full stack of capability they need to install, test it, then deliver it and field it. Those days for AI, that model does not work. And so you have to have the agility to be able to work on, the con ops, the requirements in super air quotes, the development, the delivery, the sustainment, all at the same time. It has to be at the same time. And I think commercial industry provides a great example of that for DoD, but DoD really need to change a lot of the structures to be able to take advantage of something like that. And there's certainly places that are trying, and more than trying, are making some really good headway. But I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is just getting this through all of the organizations and structures and processes that we have in place. A little out of touch with what we need in this field, my opinion. Is for latent and for edge AI in particular, certainly I'm no expert on this, okay, but I'll just, to give you at least my opinion on this, is, artificial intelligence and the application of it to so many different aspects of work and life are driven by these tremendous gains in compute and cloud computing and data science and all these sorts of things, and almost depend on connectivity to the cloud, right? But for expeditionary military forces, you can't bank on connectivity to some cloud, right? A cloud is a bank of computers that somebody else owns. I'm not going to be able to guarantee access to that. So that particular military use case for AI, and there's obviously some commercial ones too, is very specific to expeditionary forces that are going to be in environments where you can't guarantee connectivity back to some data center somewhere. So that necessitates this pursuit of edge AI and these particular capabilities that are required to run models in disconnected environments, and be able to trust that they are going to do their job exactly the way they were intended, is critical. And that's the edge AI challenge that I see.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a conversation we have very often here of how to enable that disconnected and contested environment operation, but then also when you do have pockets of connectivity, how to leverage those, how to provide updates to the operators so that they get feedback on what their models are doing, to instill that trust and send updates to their edge devices and things like that. So that context is very helpful.
You bring up a great point, right? So, and kind of back to the earlier point about, con ops and requirements and all this stuff at the same time. That's why it's so critical to be able to work directly with the users and decision makers, right? Because if you have a tool that works in some disconnected environment, but it needs to connect every so often, then they can develop the con ops right around that. Or if it needs to be able, whatever it is, they can figure that out in real time with the developers, and so too often we want to think of, oh, I have to have the perfect solution before I can take it forward. No, what we need to be able to do is trade off how would we use the tools versus how will they work, right? And do that in real time and learn from each other in a true DevOps type fashion, incremental improvements, and continuous integration with with users and decision makers.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit on how you think companies like Latent AI can cultivate that culture where our engineers and our ML scientists who don't have defense backgrounds can continue to remain grounded in the needs of the operators?
Sure. I think that there's any number of opportunities to get them face to face with users, whether it's inviting people to their place or getting out to, in the case of the Navy, to fleet concentration areas and talking with leaders and operators. Sailors love showing off their ships, and you know, as you well know, I mean, and it's eye opening for engineers when they see, oh, wow. So to maintain this rack, you have to pull it out, and you only have this much space, and you have to bend. Seeing that stuff, like that decision that you made, how it affected some aspect of a sailor's life is huge. And there's plenty of opportunities for that. I think the Navy wants to make sure that people see what our challenges are, because we want people working on solving them. So there's lots of opportunities there. There's exercises that are going on where there's, typically there will be calls for industry to come and work, hand in hand. But I do think it's important, even in the government, with government civilians, not all of them have been on ships and seen those things. And so we always used to set up visits to get people out there. It brings a great perspective to your work.
I could not agree more. And I think that also helps with their buy-in, the fleet's buy-in of the delivered technology, when they can tell that there's been hands in it that know their experiences and their pain points, and it's been made with their inputs as opposed to given to them and told how to make it work.
You got it.
Yeah. So I think if we can talk a little bit about Latent AI specifically, I know you are retired now, but you're a very busy man, so you only have a limited amount of time and bandwidth. And so what drew you to Latent AI, and why did you decide to become one of our advisors?
Well, it's kind of like I said before about the edge AI stuff. I feel very, very strong. Yeah, I don't know how philosophical to get here, but first off, I'll say, we're in a strategic competition, and nothing less than the rules-based international order and the American way of life are at stake. And when you look at what are the great strengths of the United States, first off is allies and partners and friends around the world. And I always think second, and some of this is because of what I've worked on and what I've done in my Navy career, but second is American ingenuity and our leading place in fields like artificial intelligence and cloud computing and data science. Things like those are the things that are American strengths, and so we have to capitalize on them and stay ahead. And like I said earlier, for expeditionary forces, you have to be able to do that on edge devices. That hasn't necessarily been those disconnected type environments have not been the things that have driven the AI revolution, right? But we have to take advantage of the AI revolution and figure out how to adapt it to those edge cases, and that's where latent comes in. We talked earlier about fleet adaptation. Most of the computers that we have at our disposal until, I don't know, pick your year, have already been procured, right? So it's not like anybody's going to put in a huge order for GPU power plants to go on every ship or every underwater vehicle or every USV. So you sort of have the computing that you have. Now you got to figure out, how can I run the best models on those devices, whether it's for automatic target recognition or autonomous navigation or whatever it is. How are you going to be able to run those models on those devices with the compute that you have? And that's kind of the bread and butter of Latent, is how to help figure that out.
I think one last question. Do you have any advice for Latent AI or other dual use tech startups looking to either break into or grow in the federal space?
It's not my world, so I'd have to from the commercial side looking in, I'm getting the sense now, being out for all of 2 months, that looking at the government and figuring out how to do business there is really difficult. And for as much as we tried, certainly I tried to lower that bar, it's difficult. So I think there's a couple things. I'd say first off, there are a lot of people in the government who want to do business with you, right? And in general, if you are a high tech company, bringing some new capability along, there are a lot of people in the government who want to do business with you. So you got to kind of get through a lot of the noise of, that all these program managers and bureaucrats and all this stuff are all bad people. They're not. Every one of them goes to work every single day, right, believing they're doing the best thing that they can possibly do to advance our national security, and they want to do work with you. They may not know you exist. So I guess, be bold, have a little bit of swagger. If you're especially if you're a commercial company already delivering stuff that people love for this use, and you think there's a use with the military, trust us, the military wants to hear from you. And so figure out how to make those connections and make them. Go to the trade shows, pick up the phone, send that email, post that LinkedIn thing, whatever it is, make them aware, and you will find people that want to do work with you. And I think it's critical. Anyways, there's been some obvious success stories with this, but it's tough. There's a lot of, when you're trying to develop a new ConOp, a requirement that doesn't exist for a capability that nobody knew existed, it's tough. I always used to tell the story. Hopefully you'll forgive me for this, but if you look at the systems the way they are, and think about the PPBES, right? Planning, programming, budgeting, execution system. I always used to tell the story. Let's say today you discover in your laboratory that the origins of gravity are electromagnetic, and you can develop a weapon, right? You can weaponize gravity today. So to get your first, if you try to go through the, what a lot of people do of, oh my gosh, the POM, right? The POM process, all that, it'll be at least 3 years before you get your first dime, right? And those 3 years will be spent arguing, briefing, doing all this other stuff. We don't have time for that. But that's really not, the system doesn't really work that way for these types of capabilities. There is already funding out there. There's already people that are looking for these types of capabilities. And I think it needs some creativity, some stick-to-itiveness, a little bit of swagger. Yeah, just stick with it. The government definitely wants to do work with you. And I think it's critical that we figure up ways to unleash that creativity. It's critical.
We look forward to continuing to get that advice from you as we go through this journey ourselves. Hopefully, we can embody some of that swagger that you mentioned. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about today that we haven't covered yet?
I think I would add to the, earlier when we were talking about, getting people involved with sailors and whatnot. And I know you're familiar with with organizations like the warfighting development centers and things, right? So these are people who are, at the top of their profession, who would love to hear from companies, right? Cutting edge companies that can deliver new stuff. And they're the ones who help figure out these new concepts of operations. They actually write the ConOps and write those tactics and things like that. So, I think there are organizations and structures within the Navy and Marine Corps that definitely want to talk to these companies. And I think it would provide a great opportunity for engineers, to sit down with actual users and hear what their problems are, and see them and help solve them quickly.
Yeah, like you mentioned, that's the job I was in when I left the Navy. So that is a great point. And I think our engineers would get a lot of value out of those conversations. So thank you for mentioning that. Awesome. Well, I thank you for your time today. And I look forward to working with you in the future as our advisor. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.